let's just do a mic check. How are you doing today?
Good. Doing well, thank you. Thank you for asking. Just busy, but good.
Perfect. Okay. So you know that MSU is trying to become an HSI, so I'm just gonna ask you like a few questions about it.
Okay.
So first, what's a Hispanic serving institution for those that doesn't know?
What was the first question?
What's an HSI?
Oh, an HSI stands for Hispanic Serving Institution, and by federal definition, what that means is an institution that is working towards it has to demonstrate that 25% of their full-time equivalent students have to be Latino descent. And there's also some other stipulations, but that's the main one that determines whether you can apply for an HSI status through the federal government.
Okay. What's the main purpose of this?
Well, it's, I think, twofold. It's one, to increase the numbers of Hispanics, Latinos, etc. in American universities, but it's also to bring in resources that are essentially utilized by everybody on campus. I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding that if a university gets an HSI status, that means that all the money that comes in, that they apply for and that they get, is just for Hispanics and Latinos. That's incorrect. Everybody uses the funds as they come in because it's for all of the programs and different kinds of initiatives that are developed through the once university reaches the HSI status.
Okay, so I know that they need to, well, MSU is trying to reach the 25% of Hispanic students. How are you guys trying?
Well, there's a whole initiative. I began with the initiative in about 2007, 2006, when it was first decided to go for it. I became the chair of the Public Relations Committee. At that time, they had a committee of about 65 people, and they sat down to have a dialogue on planning, what it is that they were trying to do, and what kinds of strategic approaches they would need in accomplishing that goal. So they developed a series of subcommittees that were designed to meet specific goals, and then all of them were brought together as the numbers began to increase. So, for example, they looked at programs within the university that are recruitment and retention programs. They looked at different departments. They looked at the number of disciplines that were attracting Hispanic and Latino students. And they did a lot of outreach into the community and into the high schools to look at which schools had high percentages of Latinos and Hispanics and tried to recruit them into this university. That was at least part of the process.
Okay. So you're on the working group 5, advocacy and policy development. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Well, the policy piece was really looking at the kinds of statewide policies that we would need to promote and to obtain that status. For example, one of the one that received national attention was when the university decided to develop a midpoint between out-of-state and in-state tuition, which was very characteristic of the asset bill. What this university did through the Board of Trustees is they passed a policy that they would find that median in terms of actual costs for undocumented students to come here. What that did, that spurred more activity at the state legislature, because then the state legislature realized that it was something that they probably needed to get involved in, and they turned around and passed the asset bill. Essentially, the asset bill, as you know, provides in-state tuition for children that have specific criteria. They've gone to high school here, they graduated, and they can work or they can enter higher education institutions and pay in-state tuition, followed by being able to get a job once they graduate. What had happened was there was a lot of political turmoil, because the question was, well, if you pass the asset bill and students get in-state tuition and they graduate, if they don't have Social Security numbers, how are they going to be able to work? What value does that do for the state? And at a federal level, that was when Obama jumped in and passed DACA, the Deferred Action, saying that they would pass an initiative, a bill that would give permission or give consideration and or waivers for folks that were here without, as undocumented children, to be able to work once they graduated and even during the process of going to school. So it was a total package of public policies. We also worked on the multicultural bill that essentially was passed in about 2003, but had, in our opinion, never really been fully implemented. So what we did is we reviewed that, and we worked with some of the state legislator, in particular Joe Salazar, who rewrote and added in some provisions to that bill, and we supported that. I was actually asked to organize a group of scholars that would speak at the state legislature in support of the bill. And so MSU Denver last year was very supportive of that bill, and it didn't pass, and it's up for reconsideration again. And don't know if it'll pass this time, but I think the group is going to continue to push that piece of legislation for a lot of reasons. One, we believe that all children, all students need doses of multicultural education, that it's for the common good, it's for the greater good. And secondly, that it would also increase the awareness of this population that's been in the Western Hemisphere for a very long time. So those are the kinds of policies that we passed at the state level. There were also other kinds of policies within the institution that were looked at that were impediments for keeping students in school and promoting their matriculation into graduation. So we also looked at all of those kinds of policies.
Okay. What do you have to say to those students now that are afraid because of the Trump policies? I feel that now there's like a lot of students that want to drop out of college and that are not like registering. So.
Well, I think that we all as a community have to come together. I think that with what's happening now, and I've been to some of the community meetings, the one at North High School, I was on the panel that presented on that whole issue, reassuring them that, for example, institutions, school districts will promote safety and will promote security. In other words, protect them from being arrested without warrants, not giving out any kind of information that might put them in harm's way. So a lot of different strategies were used and developed that are in place now. I know that Representative Joe Salazar is also working on some legislation to under the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment essentially says that if the federal government doesn't pass policies that the states want, then the state has the right to pass it within its own state structure. And I think that's what he's doing to protect undocumented and DACA students and immigrants in general from getting in harm's way of this atrocious rampage that's going on in American society by President Trump.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add about the HSI to students?
Yeah, I think that once school districts catch on to how the options that are going to be available for students coming here, that I'm hoping that some of the districts that have had issues in graduating Chicano, Latino, Hispanic students, that they'll put more efforts into getting them graduated so that they can go to college and go to universities. So I would tell students, you know, you need to be educated. It's through education that we change things. The lack of it keeps us in a state of perpetual powerlessness.
Sounds good. I think that's all.
Okay, good.
Okay.